What's in the Box, episodes of horror with Donna and Eric. I'm Donna.
And I'm Eric.
And we have another author with us today for Texas Author Con and Book Festival author interviews. We have Bert Edens. Welcome to the show.
Howdy, y'all.
Hello, good to see you again. We just saw you at Scares That Care
Yeah.
in Williamsburg, so it's good to see you again. So we're going to start off with some fast fire icebreaker questions.
All right.
Jason, Michael, or Freddie?
I've always liked the more realistic, I guess if you can call Jason or Michael realistic, where Freddy's in your head. Probably lean toward Jason.
Jason, okay.
Yeah. He had some really creative kills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's something that's fun about the Friday the 13th when they switched the directors. The directors actually cared enough to want to put their own stamp on it, which it kind of does feel like sometimes when you're watching the Halloween movies, they're just kind of regenerating the same story over and over again.
Right.
And they don't, and he's not flashy, which that's not a knock on Michael, but he's not doing some of the crazy stuff that they had Jason doing. And for sure, Freddy's just Freddy. And then as he grew in popularity, they just continued to try and make everything the most clever thing ever. So
he does have the best lines though.
Of course, yeah.
Yes,
luckily.
he does.
I think that's the cool thing about it, because you get three kinds. You get the first one, which was 100% serial killer vibe, all business. And then the third one, he starts getting a little funny with the one-liners. And then after that, he's just the superstar. He's almost bigger than the whole thing. So
Yep. Werewolves or vampires?
Vampires, as long as they're not sparkly.
Do you have a favorite, a particular one that you like the most?
Oh gosh. I don't know. In literature, I really liked the series that Fred Saberhagen did. I don't know why I like that one. He's more suave and sophisticated, but I don't like that as much with a lot of the movies. But I like that in the novels. For video, it's going to be, obviously Bela Lugosi's classic, but outside that, maybe Christopher Lee.
All right, nice. As a kid, what was your favorite scary movie?
I really didn't watch many scary movies until I got older. So I don't know. I'd have to really think about it. I remember seeing, as a kid, it wasn't really a horror movie, but Close Encounters of the Third Kind scared the daylights out of me. But then again, so did the Flying Monkeys in Wizard of Oz. So I don't know. I think the first movie I really got into that I thought was really cool was Evil Dead.
The original?
Yeah, the original one. And it was just one of those, it's the first time I saw that, I was like, it had humor, it had the gore. And, most things I'd seen up to then were more of the classical Universal movies with a few things thrown in from the 70s. I hadn't got into Italian horror yet, so no Suspiria or anything like that. So seeing Evil Dead was like, wow, that is pretty cool.
Yeah. I don't feel bad about the Flying Monkeys terrifying you, because I was terrorized by King Kong. I had nightmares for my mom said I had nightmares probably for about 2 years.
Yeah.
After they took us to watch King Kong, so don't feel bad.
Yeah, I remember watching King Kong in the 70s when that version came out, and it didn't bother me much at all. I just kind of viewed it as like a sci-fi type movie more than anything else, So
yeah, the one in the 70s doesn't have the same level of terror. It seems to be more of a statement on the fuel, the industry and all that nonsense, government and all that thing. But yeah, when you go back to the classics, I remember. But it's a giant monkey too. That's kind of scary.
Yeah.
Just thinking, it depends on how. When it came out, you and I were just tiny.
Yeah.
Donna, so if we would have saw it, I saw it in the theater in Germany, so it was a little bit later. But everything's delayed over there. But yeah, I know. So you see it as a young age. I could definitely see where it would be scary. But the flying monkeys are kind of terrifying. They're grabbing at you and pulling you in different directions, and they tear apart the scarecrow. So they're one of the characters. So
yeah,
but
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, when you saw Evil Dead, did you see it on VHS or how
Actually,
far after it did you see it?
I saw it on VHS. I'd have to think about how far after it was released that I saw it. And I actually discovered it through an interview with Alice Cooper, where they
Hmm.
were asking him what his current favorite horror movie was. And he had mentioned that. And I was like, I'd heard of that. So ran down to the video store and found it. It was, it was a revelation. So I'm going to say that was probably 85, maybe ish that I saw it. So not a fresh release.
Yeah, I
Not
was
a
just
fresh
say I
release.
just remember that was one of the movies that was almost kind of talked about with Faces of Death and stuff,
Hmm.
Everybody's like, okay, here's this list of 3 or 4 movies that are really underground that you need to go find in the video store, and it's gonna change, your view on these things. Texas Chainsaw Massacre
Oh,
to a lesser
absolutely.
degree. But
Yeah.
yeah, and I just remember, yeah, the first time you see Evil Dead, it really does. Because I mean he does, I mean, he's doing a ton of things with no money.
Yeah.
And it's just so amazing the way that they're able to capture with the video angles and the different special effects they do. I mean, I prefer Evil Dead 2. I think I
Yeah.
like that's my favorite, I think, but yeah, I mean, it's one of those movies that I think every kid of the 80s, has that moment, everybody has their Evil Dead moment.
Yeah. Yeah. I think they had a little more freedom with two now that they've kind of proved that they could do it. So I think he had a little more budget to do what he wanted. And I
Hmm.
think that shows. But it's kind of like listening to, garage bands, Evil Dead kind of strikes me like a garage band feel
Yeah.
for movies. It's very, like you said, it's simple, but it's very cool. And like I said, I love the humorous aspects of it, which of course, Ash really plays into in the later movies more, but
Hmm.
I like that aspect of it too.
Yeah. Now, do you have a favorite horror movie now?
Um, Probably still that one.
Still?
Um, I do throw in just for fun when people talk about, what's probably the worst one. It's so bad that it's campy, but I like it, and that's Blood Orgy of the She Devils.
Okay.
And it's bad acting. It's got okay, but it's just one of those things. It's just bad enough that it's good,
Yeah.
Uh, but I really like a lot of the classic Universal ones, like Phantom of the Opera. The reveal of taking that mask off is classic, and it was just done perfectly. I don't know if they could have done that better. That moment is one of my favorite moments in horror. Period. So.
Yeah, and then you think about the time it came out and the innocence
Yeah,
and how the innocence of the audience, because
right.
they don't have the scabs of all the great movies that we have seen over and over and over again, so nothing really shocks us. It's just,
Right.
it would have been amazing to see their reaction, in real time. That, you think about how crazy they went over Dracula and Frankenstein. There's really nothing in that that's
Mhm.
even remotely
No,
scary,
not at
but
all.
you can see how it would terrify an audience at that time. But yeah, I think you're right. I think that the reveal with his face, that really probably screwed with some people. I can imagine people leaving the theater.
Yeah,
So
that had to be. And to think that he did such a good job of hiding what that face would look like so that
mhm.
it would be a genuine reaction,
Yeah.
And I think that was pretty cool. And of course, he was known for doing his own makeup anyway, so that's pretty cool.
I feel like it's the same thing with the 70s. I think that, and then you'd have The Exorcist and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. All 3 of those must have really been amazing to see in the theater as just a person who has no clue what's going on and just, blindly walking in.
Right. Yeah, I mean, like
Oh,
Texas
the
Chainsaw
sweet.
Massacre, just the graphicness of it and the
Mhm.
wearing the skin mask and all those things. But even like I said, Exorcist, obviously with the crucifix and things she's doing there, just freaked people out. Not just the shock value. I mean, it wasn't graphic as so much, but it was just like she's doing what with that crucifix,
Yeah,
that
no, I
type of
remember
thing.
it being
So
very disturbing when I saw that of course, at a way too young age. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, the best thing about Texas Chainsaw Massacre is you watch it now, you realize that they didn't really do anything. Everything that you thought happened was in your head.
mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's a perfect example of suggestion and
Yeah,
what you can do to your audience with a book or a movie, and where you can allow the audience or the reader to take it that step further that you don't have to do it.
yeah, and I'm a big fan of that. I don't like being hit over the head with things,
Mhm.
be it literature, be it movies, whatever. I do several of my stories, short stories and such, have ambiguous endings. And Carrie, my wife, she'll be like, well, what happened? I'm like, well, what do you think happened? And she doesn't like that answer, but
Yeah.
Yeah, I always use an example. There's a Korean, it's not horror, but there's a Korean movie called Volcano High. And when a lot of the Korean movies, if you've seen so many of them, they do really well with facial expressions and tone and all that, not always dialogue. And they had a moment in there where one of the students was just walking and you could see he was really thinking about something. But it was silent, he was just acting. But when they did the English overdub, they put thoughts in his head and had that out loud. And I was like, don't do that to me. Don't let me think and feel for myself. Don't tell me what to think. So yeah, I agree with you there. It's nice that you go back and look, like you said, at Texas Chainsaw Massacre and go, well, wait a minute. So it was definitely it's classic for a reason.
Yeah. So tell us, Bert, do you have a favorite horror novel?
Oh goodness. That's a tough one. I mean, there's kind of depends on the mood. I remember it when it came out. It was just one of those that I got it on Friday and I had to work graveyard Saturday and Sunday. And I mean, I lost sleep. Read it during breaks and had to finish it that weekend, and there's not many books that have done that for me. And, there's some things in there that are problematic now that we look at, but still, I don't know many books that really, had me that wanting to dive into it and not finish, not stop putting it down.
Yeah, and it's like 1,000 plus. So you're like, I mean,
Yeah.
usually you're looking at something like 300 pages, and you're like, okay, yeah, I need to finish this weekend. But you're tackling the big one there. So
Yeah, that's
I
a
gotta be honest
commitment.
yeah, I know, right? I'm not a big fan of half that book. I think the
Yeah,
kid stuff is genius until the point where it's not, and there's a
yeah,
section that I think is ridiculous. And then I don't understand why. I don't even understand why it flew then. He probably had too much say, where he could get away with whatever he wants to, but
yeah.
somebody should have said, hey, I don't know about this part.
This is not cool,
Um,
man.
and then but I'm not a fan of the adult. I did not, I don't vibe with the adult section, and I didn't vibe with it in the miniseries or the movie.
Yeah,
And when I reread the book recently, I was still thinking like, nah, I'm not enjoying this part of the story. But when he really does coming of age really well. And so
yeah,
that first part makes up for the rest of it, and it gives you a nice ending. So you need closure. But
right.
it's funny though, as you're reading it, you're thinking, greatest thing I've ever read. And then
Yeah.
I'm like, boy, I can't wait to get back to the kids, So
You talk about something that hits you differently as an adult going the other direction
mhm.
is Pet Cemetery. Pet Cemetery, I read it as a teen. I was like, wow, that's just blew me away again. Had to finish it, obsessed with it and all that. But then I go back and reread it or watch the movie as an adult, and having losing a child means something totally different to me as a parent than it did as a teenager.
Yeah.
I felt so much more. My oldest, when he was born, was in NICU for 2 weeks. And so I had that in my head when I was watching it again, or just like, whoa, 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 totally different
Yeah.
than as a kid. It's like, oh wow, toddler got hit by a truck. Wow. I mean, spoiler alert for anybody watching. But yeah, that one goes the opposite direction. When I reread it, it was like even more powerful than what it was when I first read it.
Yeah, that's one on my list that needs to be revisited. We just did The Shining a little while ago, and
Mhm.
I, I enjoy that one every time we read it. I'm sure we picked it apart though when we did the show, but that is one I have enjoyed with him. But yeah, I can imagine the Pet Cemetery hits you totally different as an adult.
Yeah.
Just thinking about that, because and you lose a pet, and then they lose the kid, and then all the craziness, and it also is one that reads the most splatterpunky to me of his stuff.
Yeah.
It's really in your face. So, yeah, I love that one. That's one of the ones that I really, really enjoyed, no matter what. The original. I enjoy the original movie. I love the
Yeah.
book. But yeah, I definitely need to revisit that one.
Yeah. I never got now I've never read the book, but I have seen the movie a couple times. I never got the whole Zelda. Like, why is that even
Oh,
in the book?
it's
Like,
it's
or
such a big part of the book, and it is
is it?
probably, yeah, it's some of the creepiest things you'll read is
Yeah.
is Zelda stuff. Yeah, no, I remember being so creeped out by that when I was reading it as a young adult.
Yeah, because it just didn't, like I said, I've never read the book, but in the
It didn't
movie,
get the
it
amount
didn't
it needed.
seem like it fit. Like,
Mhm.
it seemed like it was just kind of like a little bit of
Yeah.
extra stuff that they put
Yeah, they
in.
definitely couldn't do the build up because it's built up through the novel enough that you're feeling it when you get to those parts. So it makes more sense with the book. But yeah, like it always is. It's almost a weird thing why even put it in the movie if they're not going to give it enough
Right.
time to give you the audience. But I think what they were hoping for was that you had read the book and then you would be able to connect the two. But yeah, you're right. If you hadn't read it, it would make no sense in the movie, or it would make just enough sense for you to question why it's even there.
Yeah.
So yeah, but we need to throw it on the list. We should probably do a Pet
Oh
Cemetery read.
yeah. Yeah,
That'll be fun.
absolutely.
So
I think I
not,
have it on my shelf.
I was gonna say, reading a book as an adult that hits differently. I didn't read it as a youngster, but The Road is one that as I read as a father, oh my God, I could barely make it through that book. So yeah, I totally get what you're saying. And I'm interested to see how Pet Cemetery reads as a 48-year-old dad. So we'll see.
49. We turned 49, Eric.
All right. Still a year from me. You know what? I always had to do that with my buddy John. I always had to ask him how old he was because we were like 6 months apart. So I would always be like, "How old are you?" And then I'd be like, "Okay, I know how old I am now." So it all blurs together.
It does. It does.
Yeah.
Even more so when you get closer to 60.
Well, I always told my wife I'd be dead at 50, so we'll see. This might be the last year we got of these videos, so we need to get hurrying up and read more books.
Oh my gosh. Okay, Debbie Downer. Gosh.
No, she can hear me talk. That's why I threw it out there. She can hear me. She's always gives me a hard time for bringing it up. But.
Now, saying how much, I guess it was your favorite horror novel what would you recommend to somebody who is new to horror? Would you recommend they start with that?
I don't know. I mean, it's yeah, talking about favorites again, the book that got me hooked on modern horror was actually Carrie. But I read that as an 8-year-old.
We all have that story.
Mm-hmm.
Huh?
We've all had that 8-year-old. I read
Yeah.
Cujo.
Yeah. Flowers in the Attic or it's Carrie or something like that. But yeah, it's as a kid, I basically absorbed and read anything I could, and read something in the newspaper, saw something about it, and parents used to just drop me off the library for my brother and I for the library for 4 or 5 hours or whatever on a Saturday, and we'd read, we'd check out books, we'd do whatever. They wouldn't let me check it out because I was 8. And so if it was happened to be on the shelves, I'd just read it, and then I would make a note of what page I was on, and I'd finish it that way.
That's cool. Nice and sneaky.
So that one's kind of got a soft spot for me too. I tell everybody I grew up, first thing I really remember that was horror wasn't really one of the ones people think of, but that was with Poe and Annabelle Lee. There was a collection I had of poems from a bunch of different people. And it was Longfellow, and it was people like that as Shakespeare, whatever. But there was something about that and the mood that he set in Annabelle Lee, and that really got me started on reading some of his short stories, and eventually Follow the House of Usher and things like that. It was just like wow. I don't know, for modern horror, I guess it depends because there's a lot of people you talk to them and ask them what if they don't like horror. I usually say, well, what scares you? Because usually if I find out what scares them, then I'd find something that they could read that they would find as being horrific. They may not like slasher movies, but something that is more creepy, like The Woman in Black or something. That's not really graphic, but it's creepy as hell. Those kind of movies. It kind of depends. I don't know. I kind of like if you started with Night Shift or Different Seasons or something from King would be a good.
You know what? I was going to suggest. I was going to wait to see what you came up with, but Different Seasons, right?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it, and I'm a big fan of collections and short stories because I've discovered so many authors that way. I couldn't even imagine listing who I've discovered through that. I just the series that Ellen Datlow's done with the best of horror and all that. I've discovered so many people over the years with that, and same thing with sci-fi, fantasy, whatever. But yeah, I think those would be a good one because they're kind of bite-sized pieces of horror that nothing really in Night Shift or Different Seasons are really graphic. There's nothing really over the top there, and so it kind of give you good creepy or weird or whatever. So it might be a good start.
Yeah, the only thing with Poe nowadays is I was worried about the language. Just
Yeah.
it's almost like you're giving them a homework assignment. A lot of people don't really like to dive into that, but if you can get into Poe and Lovecraft and all that, I think those are always good ones to visit later. But
Yeah.
like with King, I think you have to build up to it. I don't think you can just dive into it.
No, I think it would be too intimidating, and it takes a bit to build up to, he doesn't not everything starts as classic as The Stand does with the first line. So, some of his things build up, and it takes a little bit to get going. But
Yeah. Well, The Stand was my very first horror book that I read.
mhm.
And then I went into it. I read it. And then of course I got lost in like Dean Koontz and stuff. So I jumped right into
Yeah, no, but I think if you read anything by King, then it makes sense that it's the second book you read because it's so iconic. But you rarely hear anybody said I read it first.
Mhm.
It's always something that took them there. And you're right. It's because I think it's an intimidation thing because nobody wants to, when you get a brick and you're like, unless you're into it, you're like, it's kind of too much. So, but yeah, I mean, The Stand. I mean, what made you read The Stand first? Did somebody give it to you, or is it just something you happen to think?
my mom read it and it
Mhm.
was in the house. And
Oh,
I was
perfect.
like, oh, that looks cool.
Yeah.
And so you would have had was it the traditional cover, the original cover?
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's a cool cover too. That would draw you to it right away. So
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can ask a question for y'all. Turn it around. If you've read both, which do you prefer, Stand or Swan Song?
I've not read Swan Song.
oh, I can one up you. I have not read either.
Oh,
I have
well,
read
okay then.
some.
Some
I've
kind
read
of host
about
y'all are.
I've read about 75, 100 pages of The Stand, and I just couldn't get into it at the time, so I put it down. In fact, I sent my copy to Andy a long time ago because he was looking for it, and I just haven't picked it back up. So I'd like to give it another shot, but it didn't blow me away at the time I was reading it. But that's probably more to do with me than anything. I'll read anything before Needful Things and give it a shot. In fact, I've read most everything up to Needful Things, but Needful Things, the ending to that, annoyed me so much that I have refused to read King after that. So
I'm hesitant to read Swan Song only because we just read a McCammon and it was
I know.
my first McCammon and
Yeah,
I
it
did
was.
not enjoy it. I mean, I enjoyed it, but I was not impressed.
Yeah, we read The Wolf's Hour, and it wasn't. It's more of a World War II
Yeah.
novel.
It's not one of
I
my
think.
favorites.
I think if we read some of his actual like Stinger or
Night
Dead
Boat.
Ship, or, yeah, Night Boat or whatever, I think we would have had a totally different tune. I think we built it up in our head though when we went into it because of because every werewolf book we read was disappointing except for maybe one, possibly two. So, but yeah, no, that's on our to-do list though, is to get those done. So,
Yep.
what
Yeah.
what would you think? Do you have a preference?
I kind of lean towards Swan Song.
I've heard that more than once. I've heard a
And
lot of
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
and I don't know what it is because I like the characters, and maybe it's just the progression or the way that McCammon weaves in the different characters into it and all. But it's one of those. It's probably 2/3 of the way in. It drags, but Stan does too at times too. So you can't have anything of that magnitude and not have it drag. But I don't know. I think I like the climax of Swan Song better, and I think I like the core characters a little bit better. So
If I have a complaint with King, it's that I don't feel like he's always able to finish the book the way it needs to be finished. Sometimes I feel like he just finishes because
yeah,
he's done. He's kind of bored. And so if the ending to Swan Song actually delivers, then I could see how that would become your favorite out of the two, just because you get that satisfying ending.
right.
But yeah, no, it's on our to-do list. I feel like we've let you down. Most of the time we know exactly what y'all are talking about when you throw something out there, but you've thrown a curveball,
Yeah.
which is funny because our last interview was funny because she hadn't seen or read anything that we had asked about, and a comical way. It was because she's a fantasy writer, so
Yeah, I saw
everything we
that.
bring. So it's it'll be fun to have both of those out there. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the things to talk about, like favorite authors and such, I mean, Stephen King, like I said, Carrie is how I got started into modern horror. And that was before I found out that I shared a birthday with him.
Oh wow.
And with H.G. Wells. So another of my favorite authors from different genres. But I've always said, like, he doesn't strike me as a classically good writer, but he's a hell of a storyteller.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. He's
he always strikes
definitely.
me as that guy sitting on the front porch, grandpa telling you the story, and that's how his stuff reads to me. It doesn't read to me as in, oh, it's very well organized and way the structure. And I don't think that. I just feel like somebody's telling me a story, and I like that.
Yeah. No, I totally get that. And I think that might be why he's so popular, because even people that don't like to read understand the power of his stories, and so they'll put up with, and I mean, he pulls a lot of people that have no clue. So, and the other people forgive him for not following the rules because he's so, prolific that he's allowed to break them.
Right.
But to go back to what you just said a second ago with H.G. Wells, what's your favorite H.G. Wells story?
Probably War of the Worlds. I mean, it's just I think when I first read it, probably I'm going to say 12, maybe something like that. I was 12 when I read it, and I just really liked it. There's something about I had actually read it just before. Gosh, I'm going to show my age here. Back in the '80s when the TV show V came out,
Oh, I love that show.
and I had
We're gonna
read.
show all our ages here.
Yeah, I know. I had read War of the Worlds not long before that, and so there was a lot of that kind of jived and made me think of that. But I just I don't know. I just like that alien invasion type of story. So, but yeah,
Now,
he's got a lot of good stuff. So,
spoiler alert. So if everybody hasn't read this story, you mute us for 3 seconds or whatever, 10 seconds. But the ending, every time I see anything War of the Worlds, any remake, Tom Cruise's, even Independence Day, which is just
yeah,
a remake of it, and anything you see of it, everybody that doesn't know the story always is upset that they get killed just by a simple, like a cold or whatever. You know what I
yeah,
mean? It makes total sense that would be the thing that ends it. But
right.
did that irritate you at all, or are you okay with
No,
that kind of ending?
no, and it made sense. And I think part of it is by then I had already learned some of what had happened with indigenous people and colonization and all that. So that just made total sense to me, kind of in a reverse way.
Right.
Like what if Columbus had landed in the Dominican Republic, what's now the Dominican Republic, and he had died from the diseases they had.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I
it kind
mean,
of reminded me of that.
I'm gonna say I'm with you. It makes sense. It's anticlimactic in a way, but
Mhm.
also it makes total sense that it would be that.
Right.
What's cool is,
Probably more than 10 seconds I had to mute us, but
yeah,
That's all right.
my dad actually had an album of War of the Worlds.
Oh, that's cool.
ooh.
And so it was the album, you would play it, and it came with an illustrated book
Ooh.
that you could follow along. And the illustrations in that book were just they just popped right off the page. And
That's
that
cool.
was my first experience with War of the Worlds. Was
That's the best way to do it.
Yeah, my brother and I would listen to that album all the time. We would put it on, we'd pull out the book, and we would just look through the pages, and it was just an amazing experience.
Yeah.
Very cool. I would say my favorite's Island of Dr. Monroe, I guess, if I
Yeah.
was gonna pick one.
Moreau. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very good.
What about
That's another
is War of
book
the World?
I've been wanting to read.
Ooh, okay.
Island of
Let's throw
Dr.
that on the
Monroe.
list. Let's throw that on the list.
All
He's
right,
got a
so
lot of good ones. But we could do a whole section on just his stories.
yeah.
Because even though he's a science fiction writer, a lot of that stuff is scary, horrific if you were in that situation.
I mean, aliens, so the image for the War of the Worlds in the book, it was just tidal waves of blood.
Oh, that's cool.
Um,
Yeah.
Going through the town. So that's horrific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're gonna share my screen here because we got covers that we're showing. So for people who don't know you, Bert, what genre do you write in?
I think Dead Orphans kind of speaks for itself.
Yeah,
I actually have been published in several things. But the first thing I actually had published was Yeah, I had to think about the when. Way back when my oldest was getting ready to go into kindergarten, somebody was gathering up stories about parents of premature children, which Zach was a month early.
Mhm.
And it was kind of a what struggles did he have, what kind of things do we know during the pregnancy, where is he now, is meant to be something that could go to doctors' offices and things like that. They could read that and say, I'm scared to death about what's going on with my baby or what could happen to him, but here's some stories of hope. And anyway, that was the first thing I actually had published. And he was 5 then, and he's 31 now. So it's been a while. And then life kind of gets in the way. And then probably about, I don't know, 12, 13 years ago, I started getting back into it. I've had things published in anthologies that are straight fiction, maybe heartbreaking, but not horror per se. But most of what I do is, you can see from there, is horror or dark fiction. Some of the things in Dead Orphans are going to be heartbreaking or whatever, but they're probably not horrific unless, like I said, it touches you because it's a familiar life experience or something like that.
Mhm.
Do you have a genre you prefer to write in?
Yeah, I probably naturally write in horror. And I think, we all draw on life experiences or things you've seen. And for some reason, it's like, I tend to gravitate toward that. And Carrie, bless her heart, she's my alpha reader. And, I'll send her something to read or something. She'll look at it and say, all right, how many kids die in this one? So, I don't always kill the children, but as I say, I'm not afraid to. So
I don't
Yeah.
always kill the children.
yeah, and well, Dismember the Coop. Donna, you've got a story in there with me.
Yep.
And in that's kind of the same thing. It's a trauma story about a child. So why not?
Now, notice on there it says edited by you.
Correct.
Which do you like doing more, the writing, or do you like putting the anthologies together and seeing everybody's story and doing that?
That was the first time I had done anything as far as compiling an anthology.
Mhm.
I've edited for people, as far as
Mhm.
professionally, everything from developmental editing down to just line editing. But that was the first time I put something together like that, and it was fun. We put out the call for it, and we actually ended up with 16 stories, 17 stories. One pulled their story, and then the other one, she thought that the anthology wasn't going to happen, so she submitted to another market. And basically, I mean, it was more important for her to get into that market than this one, so she pulled it from that. And I'm like, cool, I get it.
Yeah, no, I get that. Yeah.
Absolutely, and that's what I'm saying. I mean, that's the market she wants to break into. So that versus the charity anthology, I got no hard feelings there. And she was straight up about it, and so that was good. But it was
That's the
interesting.
best thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And she, anyway, on this anthology, on Dismember the Coop, it we ended up with 15 stories from people in 4 different countries, 2 different continents. So it's a good wide variety. It was interesting editing something. I tried to intentionally with the stories we had 3 people from the UK, try to not edit out their language, their way of spelling and things like that. They spelled color with a U. I left it in there because I wanted it to be the way they would tell the story. So it was kind of hard that I may, do, Dave McCluskey is one of the ones that has a story in there. I do his, and I've got to shift, and I've got to edit Donna's, and it's like, okay, totally different way of writing and spelling and everything else, and you kind of have to shift. But it was fun putting together, and it's a charity anthology, which is even better because then it's going for a good cause. So
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I really enjoyed writing my story for Dismember the Coop. It was a fun story to write.
mhm.
And
And I like it because you kind of took, with Going Home, you took a story that is definitely that, who how are they going to see me, how how you going to see me now, the song,
yeah, how you gonna
and
see
took
me
it in
now?
a very, very dark direction. I liked it. It was graphic at times, and that's the whole point.
Mm.
So
Yeah, I really liked McCluskey's story too, formerly.
yeah, it's
Oh,
creepy.
yes. Yes, because he actually sent it to me before he sent it to you,
Oh,
and he's
did
like,
he?
"Hey, can you read this for me?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Okay, all right." And then when you got into the meat of the story, I'm like, Holy crap, that's really creepy.
Yeah, he really did. He did a good job of putting that all together.
Yeah.
And a couple people that I had a couple people say it's their least favorite, but I've also had people say it's their favorite. But the thing I really like about that is that, and people I've talked to and or reading reviews would be like, oh, I really loved um, My Dead Drunk Friends, which is a story that Joe Scipione did on based on the song by the same name that Hollywood Vampires did. You know, they love that, or they love the one that Paul Lubichevsky did, and things like that. And it's people mention different stories as their favorites, and that makes me happy too. If everybody
Yeah.
always listed the same one, it made me worry that the other 14 sucked, you know?
Right. Right.
So it's
Yeah.
always good to get that feeling. And it's
Yeah.
some really good stories. I thought that I got lucky with the people that submitted them.
Yeah. So you have the collection of your dark short fiction and then Dismember the Coop.
Hmm.
So those are
Yeah.
two
Yeah.
things.
Dead Orphans is just it's got everything in there from some tweets because I've always been one I love word economy. You know, I love
Mm,
being able to pare things down. And when I edit, I always am telling people, you know, can you remove, you know, you don't need to say and then, you can just say then, or remove the that, or, you know, instead of saying you know, I stood up, to say I stood. You know, you
Right.
can always pare down words to something tighter. And the good thing about tweets is, you know, they had like a daily word prompt that somebody just throw out a word like, you know, Jaws or something. And then you had to write a tweet length story, which at one point was 140 characters using that word. And I love that challenge of trying to write almost a complete story in that length. And it's interesting. It's interesting. You
mm,
really have to be very mindful of every single character,
Mhm.
not just words.
yeah.
But then I've also got all the way up to just short stories and things like that. And it was just fun to put together. Like I said, some of them are dark and some of them are pretty violent. There's a content warning on the back for all kinds of things because it doesn't glorify anything as far as essay or CSA or anything like that, but the topics are touched on. So I always tell everybody to beware of that, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah. So tell us about your writing environment. When you're writing, do you listen to music? Do you have the TV on? Do you have to have silence? Do you have
Uh,
to have the creepy twins from The Shining?
They're always looking over my shoulder. Yeah, they're not actually in that. That's the empty hallway.
Oh.
Um, I am definitely one. I will play very loud hard rock and heavy metal when I write. And the lyrics don't seem to bother me a bit. But something about the tempo, the
Mhm.
anger of it, something, whatever, I don't know, always seems to help me with my writing, kind of keeps the juices flowing. So I know some people do that like with classical music or something or whatever, but with me, it's definitely hard rock or heavy metal.
I found on YouTube you can get like 90 minutes to a couple hours of no vocal metal. And
Oh,
so you'll
interesting.
get all of the, like you said, the loudness of the genre of music, but you don't have anybody singing at all.
Yeah.
So
Now I've always thought I've heard people say that's one reason like why they listen to instrumentals, classical or something like that, because the lyrics are distracting. And I think to me it's background noise, even though I'm very lyric oriented, being a writer in particular, and I always analyze lyrics and songs and all that, and ruin a few songs for Carrie. Sorry, Carrie, by explaining them to her. But yeah, the lyrics never seem to bother me, and I think it's because I tend to just do like a Spotify playlist of, you know, everything Iron Maiden or everything 80s
mhm.
metal or whatever the case may be. And I think because I know the songs, I don't find myself singing along with them in my head. It's just tempo, you know?
Yep.
So Carrie hears the heavy metal. She knows you're writing. Is that what it is?
Nah. I tend to write more on weekends or at lunchtime at work type of thing. I work from home, and so I'll do that. But I probably do more writing, like I said, either on weekends or after everybody's gone to bed or whatever. So if I'm going to be blaring, then I'll have headphones on or something.
Oh, well,
So
that's no fun.
I won't subject her to that. No. I love my wife. She loves me. I'm not depriving her of sleep.
Yeah.
I start doing that, we will have attorneys involved, and we don't want that.
Oh, geez. Yeah. So tell us about, do you have any new projects in the works that you got
Um,
going on?
I think the only thing pending is there's an anthology out of songs inspired by or stories inspired by the music of Black Sabbath,
Ooh.
and that's supposed to be coming out, I think, July. And that was kind of cool. I had a fun story on that. Gave it a good redneck spin on one of the songs, and Tommy Clark is still mad at me for stealing the song he wanted to do.
I
But
can imagine.
Yeah.
it's like you picked the one song of theirs that I wanted to do. But I got dibs on it. But that's fun, and it's also a charity project. So that's always fun too. Otherwise, it's just I'm writing, working on whatever projects. I've got a novel length thing I'm working on, and I always seem to start novel lengths and I get sidetracked, and that's probably why I've written so many short stories. So I'll write for a while
Yeah.
and then, ooh, what about this or what about that? And I'll get sidetracked. So
So do you prefer short stories?
um I don't it's hard to say because I've not finished anything like novel length yet, you know? So I don't know. I've got a lot of ideas, so I've just got to do it. And you
Mhm.
know, I've made Carrie a promise that someday she would be a kept woman with me living with us living on the beach. So I better hold up my end of the bargain on that.
Right.
Get some writing done.
Yeah. All right. So besides coming to Texas AuthorCon and Book Festival, where can people find your books?
The best thing, I mean, they're always on Amazon or Barnes and Noble. I do have a shop where you can order them directly from me, and that's just bertedensshop.com.
Okay.
And that way you can order them and get them directly from me. But obviously, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. I mean, I can order them through the Walmart app if I wanted to. That's here for wide distribution, you know.
Right.
So, and I'm disappointed. I thought y'all would ask me about favorite cryptid.
No, well, we can, but that's actually the second series.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
you're getting your first time on, so we're giving you the first
Okay,
crack at
I'll say
the
that for the next
questions.
time then.
yep, next year we'll ask you what your favorite cryptid
Well,
is.
no,
That
I'm
sounds
curious now. We're gonna have to do it
Well,
now. What's
yeah,
your
now we
favorite
need to
cryptid?
know what's your favorite cryptid.
good.
I gotta know.
Probably not one you're familiar with. The favorite one is one from the I guess Lords or whatever, the Dominican Republic. It's called the Saguapa,
Oh,
and it's a woman that is alternately beautiful and horrific, usually blue skin, long black hair, and the interesting feature about her is her feet are on backwards.
Hmm.
And so it's you
okay.
can't track her because you always go in the wrong direction. But she can alternately appear very beautiful to lure somebody to them, kind of like a siren would, and then turn horrific and take them out. Um, but they're known to hide in the mountains of the Dominican Republic, and they have she has a big base not just in some of the African culture that came there, but also some of the local indigenous tribes, the Taino. Some of it's based in some of their lore too. And I don't remember where I read about that, but it was fascinating. And I actually have a story in Dead Orphans about it. But it's just so radically different than a lot of the things we see, like
Hmm.
goats, you know,
Yeah,
or whatever, you know, and you know, Arkansas has the Boggy Creek monster, the folk
right.
monster, and that's probably you know a lot of people know that, or they know some version of Sasquatch, Yeti, whatever. But there's just something about that was just radically different, so it's kind of become my favorite.
Very cool.
Nice. Well, now we got to come up with another question for you for next year.
Oh, I know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
That's all right. All right, cool. So
Hey,
we will,
at least now you know I watch the
Yeah,
podcast.
yeah,
yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
exactly. So yeah, we'll have a link to Bert's website down in the description. We'll also have a link to the Eventbrite so that you can grab your ticket to Texas AuthorCon and Book Festival. It is free, but if you grab a ticket, you will be entered to win prizes. Bert, it's been a pleasure having you on, and we'll see you in a few months.
Thanks, y'all. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no
Take it easy.
problem.